Beneath the vast expanse of the world's oceans lie mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about ancient civilization. What if I told you that two of history's most legendary lost continents weren't just separate myths, but pieces of the same incredible puzzle? What if Lemuria and Mu weren't isolated civilizations that vanished into the depths, but interconnected superstates that once formed the backbone of a global network more advanced than anything we can imagine today? Picture this: a world where massive landmasses stretched across both the Pacific and Indian Oceans, connected by trade routes, shared technologies, and unified governance systems that spanned half the globe. A civilization so sophisticated that their colonial reach extended from the mysterious statues of Easter Island to the ancient temples of India, all controlled from sprawling metropolitan centers that now rest miles beneath the waves. I'm about to take you on a journey that will completely reshape how you think about human history. We're going to explore evidence that suggests these weren't just two separate lost continents, but components of an ancient superstate network that makes our modern, globalized world look primitive by comparison. And here's the thing that's going to blow your mind. The deeper we dig into this theory, the more the puzzle pieces start fitting together in ways that are absolutely impossible to ignore. Now, before we dive headfirst into this rabbit hole, I need you to understand something crucial. What we're about to discuss isn't your typical ancient history lesson. This is a complete reimagining of human civilization itself, backed by geological discoveries, archaeological anomalies, and cultural connections that span continents. We're talking about a theory so comprehensive that it explains everything from why certain architectural styles appear independently across the world to how ancient civilizations possess knowledge they supposedly shouldn't have had. But here's where it gets really interesting. The story of how these interconnected superstates came to light reads like the greatest detective story ever told, involving Victorian scientists, mystical societies, and modern researchers who stumbled upon evidence that would make you question everything you learned in school. Let me start with a name that most people have never heard: Philip Sclater. Back in 1864, this British zoologist was trying to solve what seemed like an impossible puzzle. He was studying lemur fossils, and something didn't add up. These creatures existed on Madagascar and in India, but nowhere in between. Not in Africa, not in the Middle East, nowhere. It was as if these animals had somehow teleported across thousands of miles of ocean. Sclater's solution was revolutionary for its time. He proposed that there must have been a massive continent connecting these regions, a landmass he named Lemuria after the lemurs themselves. Now, here's where the story takes an incredible turn. What started as a simple scientific explanation for animal distribution was about to become the foundation for one of the most elaborate theories about ancient civilization ever conceived. Enter Ernst Haeckel, a German biologist who took Sclater's idea and ran with it in a direction nobody saw coming. Haeckel looked at this proposed lost continent and had a thought that would change everything. What if Lemuria wasn't just home to ancient lemurs, but to ancient humans? What if this sunken landmass was actually the cradle of human civilization itself? But that was just the beginning. The real game changer came when Helena Blavatsky and the Theosophical Society got their hands on these ideas. Blavatsky claimed she had access to ancient texts from Atlantis itself, documents that revealed the true scope of these lost civilizations. According to her sources, Lemuria wasn't operating in isolation. It was part of a vast network of advanced societies, with Atlantis serving as another major hub in what was essentially a prehistoric global empire. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like science fiction, right? But hold on. Because this is where James Churchward enters the picture, and his discoveries are going to make you reconsider everything you thought you knew about the ancient world. Churchward spent decades researching what he called Mu, a massive Pacific civilization that he claimed was the mother of all ancient cultures. But here's what makes his work absolutely fascinating. he didn't just describe Mu as another lost continent. He mapped out an entire interconnected system that spanned both the Pacific and Indian Oceans, with colonies and outposts connecting these superstates in a web of communication and trade that covered half the planet. According to Churchward's research, Mu stretched from Hawaii in the north all the way down to Easter Island in the south, covering over 5,000 miles from east to west. We're talking about a landmass larger than South America, populated by 64 million people who had mastered engineering, agriculture, and sciences that rivaled modern technology. But here's the kicker. Churchward claimed this wasn't just one isolated civilization. Mu was the central hub of a global network that included colonies in Egypt, India, Burma, Central America, and Greece. Every major ancient civilization we know about was supposedly just a fragment of this vast, interconnected system, scattered remnants of a prehistoric superstate that once unified the world under a single, advanced culture. Think about that for a moment. If this theory is correct, then the mysterious similarities we see between ancient civilizations worldwide aren't coincidences or independent discoveries. They're evidence of a shared origin, proof that these cultures were all connected to the same source, all pieces of the same massive puzzle. The scope of this proposed network is absolutely staggering. We're talking about trade routes that spanned oceans, communication systems that connected continents, and technological knowledge that was shared across distances that would have been impossible for primitive civilizations to traverse. The inhabitants of these superstates supposedly possessed advanced writing systems, sophisticated government structures, and engineering capabilities that allowed them to build the megalithic monuments we still marvel at today. And here's where the story gets even more incredible. According to these theories, the people of Mu and Lemuria weren't just advanced technologically, they were spiritually evolved beings with psychic abilities and scientific knowledge that we're only beginning to understand today. They had mastered forms of energy that we can barely comprehend, built cities that were marvels of engineering and beauty, and developed spiritual practices that connected them to cosmic forces beyond our current understanding. But if these interconnected superstates were so advanced, so powerful, so dominant across the ancient world, what happened to them? How did civilizations that spanned continents and commanded technologies beyond our imagination simply vanish without a trace? The answer, according to these theories, lies in one of the most catastrophic events in human history, a global disaster so complete, so devastating, that it didn't just destroy individual civilizations, it shattered the entire interconnected network that had unified the ancient world. We're talking about earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and geological upheavals that literally broke apart the foundations of these superstates, sending massive landmasses plunging into the ocean depths in what Churchward described as almost a single night. This wasn't just a local catastrophe affecting one region. This was a coordinated global disaster that simultaneously destroyed multiple interconnected civilizations, explaining why advanced knowledge seemed to disappear from so many parts of the world at roughly scattered and isolated, became the same time. The survivors, the founders of the civilizations we know from recorded history, carrying fragmented memories of their lost homeland that eventually became the myths and legends we study today. Now, I know this sounds like an incredible story, almost too incredible to believe. But here's where things get really interesting, because modern science has started uncovering evidence that makes these theories a lot more plausible than you might think. Recent geological discoveries have turned the scientific world on its head, and they're revealing evidence that would have been dismissed as fantasy just decades ago. In 2013, researchers made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the academic community. They found actual traces of a lost continent in the Indian Ocean, sitting exactly where the ancient theories claimed Lemuria should have existed. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Scientists have now identified multiple sunken landmasses across our planet's oceans. There's Zealandia in the Pacific, a massive submerged continent that's 94% underwater. There's Mauritia in the Indian Ocean, and the Kerguelen Plateau, all remnants of ancient landmasses that once existed above sea level. Suddenly, the idea of lost continents doesn't sound so far-fetched anymore. And here's something that's going to make your jaw drop. Researchers studying these sunken landmasses have discovered that India and Madagascar were actually connected not once, but twice in Earth's distant past. They were neighbors in an ancient microcontinent called Mauritia over 2 billion years ago, and later in a supercontinent called Gondwana. These landmasses didn't separate until about 70 million years ago, which means there was indeed a connection between these regions, just as the early theories suggested. But the real game changer is what scientists have found in the Pacific. Remember Churchward's claims about Mu spanning vast distances across the Pacific Ocean? Well, it turns out there was a massive landmass in the Pacific that existed during prehistoric times called Sundaland. This continental shelf around Indonesia was exposed during the Ice Ages, creating a land bridge that humans used to reach Australia. It was submerged gradually as sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age. But here's the fascinating part. This region contains some of the most violent volcanic activity on Earth. There's documented evidence of a catastrophic eruption in this region about 60,000 years ago that may have decimated the human population, creating what scientists call a population bottleneck, where our entire species was reduced to just a few hundred individuals. This discovery comes from mitochondrial DNA studies, and it suggests that a single geological event in the Pacific region nearly wiped out humanity entirely. Now, think about what this means for our interconnected superstate theory. If massive landmasses existed in both the Pacific and Indian Oceans, and if catastrophic geological events could simultaneously affect vast regions, then the framework for these ancient superstates becomes scientifically plausible. We're not just talking about mythical continents anymore. We're talking about real geological formations that could have supported advanced civilizations. But the evidence doesn't stop with geology. When you start examining the archaeological record with fresh eyes, patterns emerge that are absolutely mind-blowing. Take megalithic architecture, for instance. Massive stone structures built with precision that defies explanation appear all over the world, from Easter Island in the Pacific to the temples of India, from the pyramids of Egypt to the ancient sites of Central America. The construction techniques are remarkably similar. The astronomical alignments are consistent, and the level of sophistication suggests a shared knowledge base that spans continents. The traditional explanation is that these civilizations independently developed similar techniques. But when you map out these sites geographically, something incredible becomes apparent. They form a pattern that directly corresponds to the proposed colonial network of Mu and Lemuria. Every major megalithic site on Earth sits in a location that would have been a logical outpost or colony for these interconnected superstates. Even more compelling is the linguistic evidence. Languages from completely isolated regions show remarkable similarities that linguists have struggled to explain. Sanskrit words appear in languages across the Pacific. Polynesian terms show up in South American dialects. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs share symbols with writing systems found on Easter Island. If these civilizations developed in complete isolation, how do we explain these linguistic connections spanning thousands of miles of ocean? The cultural evidence is equally stunning. Creation myths from around the world tell remarkably similar stories of advanced beings who came from across the waters, bringing knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and engineering. These aren't vague similarities either. The details are specific, consistent, and widespread across cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. Ancient navigation techniques provide another piece of the puzzle. Pacific Islanders possessed navigational knowledge that allowed them to traverse vast ocean distances with pinpoint accuracy, using techniques that modern sailors find difficult to replicate even with advanced instruments. How? Did island peoples develop such sophisticated oceanic navigation unless they inherited this knowledge from a maritime civilization that had mastered long-distance sea travel? The metallurgical evidence is perhaps even more intriguing. Ancient civilizations worldwide show evidence of advanced metalworking techniques that required knowledge of chemistry and engineering that supposedly didn't exist at the time. Bronze alloys with specific compositions appear simultaneously in regions separated by thousands of miles. Advanced steelworking techniques show up in cultures that supposedly discovered metallurgy independently. But here's where the theory gets really sophisticated. These weren't just trade connections or occasional contact between distant civilizations. The evidence suggests a coordinated system of governance, technology transfer, and cultural exchange that operated on a global scale. We're talking about standardized weights and measures appearing across continents, architectural principles being applied consistently worldwide, and astronomical knowledge being shared between civilizations that supposedly couldn't communicate with each other. The agricultural evidence supports this interconnected network theory as well. Crops that originated in specific regions appear in archaeological sites on opposite sides of the planet, often in contexts that predate known trade routes. Sweet potatoes from South America show up in Pacific Islands before any documented contact. Corn appears in ancient Egyptian sites. Plants that should have been geographically isolated somehow spread across vast ocean barriers. Recent underwater archaeology has added even more compelling evidence to this puzzle. Submerged structures off the coasts of multiple continents show architectural similarities that suggest common origins. The underwater city of Yonaguni off Japan shares construction techniques with submerged structures near India. Stone circles found on ocean floors in different parts of the world show identical astronomical alignments. The astronomical knowledge encoded in these ancient sites is particularly striking. Civilizations worldwide possess detailed knowledge of planetary cycles, solar patterns, and stellar movements that required centuries of careful observation and mathematical calculation. But here's the kicker. They all use the same baseline measurements and calculation methods. It's as if they were all working from the same astronomical textbook, sharing data and refinements across a global network of observers. DNA analysis has revealed another layer of this interconnected puzzle. Genetic markers that should be geographically isolated appear in populations separated by vast distances. Polynesian genetic markers show up in South American populations. Ancient European genetic signatures appear in unexpected Pacific populations. These genetic connections suggest population movements and interactions on a scale that challenges our understanding of ancient capabilities. The disaster archaeology provides the final piece of evidence that ties everything together. Geological layers worldwide show evidence of simultaneous catastrophic events that occurred roughly 12,000 years ago. Massive floods, volcanic eruptions, and seismic activity all concentrated in a narrow time period that corresponds exactly with the proposed destruction of these interconnected superstates. Impact crater evidence suggests that this catastrophic period may have been triggered by cosmic events, possibly asteroid impacts or cometary bombardments that destabilized geological systems worldwide. The Younger Dryas period, a sudden climate cooling event that occurred around this same time frame, shows evidence of rapid environmental changes that would have been devastating to advanced coastal civilizations. What we're looking at isn't just the possibility that Lemuria and Mu existed as separate lost continents. We're looking at evidence for a prehistoric global civilization that was more interconnected and technologically sophisticated than anything in recorded history. A network of superstates that shared knowledge, resources, and culture across distances that we consider challenging even today. The implications of this discovery are staggering, but we're just getting started. Because when you start connecting these dots, when you begin to see the full scope of what we're dealing with, you realize that everything we've been taught about the progression of human civilization, might be completely backwards. Think about this for a moment. We're told that human society developed in a linear progression from primitive hunter-gatherers to agricultural communities to complex civilizations. But what if that's not how it happened at all? What if we're looking at the scattered remnants of a fall rather than the gradual building up of complexity? The technological capabilities that would have been required to maintain these interconnected superstates are mind-boggling. We're talking about a civilization that would have needed advanced shipbuilding techniques to traverse vast ocean distances regularly. They would have required sophisticated communication systems to coordinate activities across multiple continents. Most importantly, they would have needed organizational structures capable of managing resources and populations on a truly global scale. But here's where the evidence gets really compelling. When you examine the ancient texts and oral traditions from around the world, you start finding detailed descriptions of exactly these kinds of capabilities. Pacific Island traditions speak of great voyaging vessels that could carry hundreds of people across vast distances. Ancient Indian texts describe flying machines and advanced weapons. Egyptian records mention technologies for moving massive stone blocks that we still can't fully explain. Now, I'm not saying these ancient peoples had helicopters and computers, but what I am suggesting is that they possessed sophisticated understanding of principles we're only rediscovering today. They understood leverage and counterweight systems that allowed them to move stones weighing hundreds of tons. They had mastered metallurgy techniques that produced alloys we struggle to replicate. They developed astronomical calculation methods that rival modern precision. The engineering evidence is particularly fascinating when you start looking at it through the lens of an interconnected network. Take the precision cutting of massive stone blocks found at sites worldwide. These aren't rough-hewn primitive constructions. These are precisely fitted megalithic structures that show evidence of advanced planning and execution. The tolerances are so exact that you can't slip a piece of paper between the joints. What's even more remarkable is that these precision techniques appear simultaneously across the globe. It's not like one civilization developed these methods and they gradually spread to other regions over centuries. The techniques show up everywhere at roughly the same time, as if they were part of a coordinated construction program being implemented across the entire network. The logistics of such coordination would have been incredible. Imagine the planning required to quarry specific types of stone, transport them across vast distances, and position them with mathematical precision at sites around the world. This isn't something a primitive civilization stumbles into by accident. This requires sophisticated project management, advanced transportation systems, and precise measurement standards that remain consistent across thousands of miles. But the real breakthrough in understanding these superstates comes when you start looking at the energy systems they might have used. Recent analysis of ancient sites has revealed some absolutely incredible discoveries about how these civilizations might have powered their operations. Acoustic analysis of megalithic sites worldwide has revealed that many of these structures were designed as massive resonance chambers. The stones were positioned and shaped to amplify specific frequencies. But here's the kicker. These aren't random sound effects. The frequencies these structures produce correspond to what modern science recognizes as beneficial resonant frequencies for human health and consciousness. More intriguingly, these same frequencies appear to have effects on water, crystalline structures, and even plant energy for practical applications we're only beginning to understand. Had discovered ways to harness acoustic growth. Some researchers suggest that these ancient peoples, they might have used sound waves for everything. The electromagnetic properties of these ancient sites, from healing to agriculture to possibly even transportation megalithic structures, are built on locations provide another layer of mystery. Many with unusual electromagnetic characteristics. They're positioned on geological formations that naturally generate electrical fields. Some sites show evidence of having been designed to focus and amplify these natural electromagnetic energies. Ground-penetrating radar at these locations has revealed elaborate underground chamber systems that seem designed to channel and direct energy flows. These aren't simple storage areas or burial chambers. These are sophisticated underground networks that show evidence of having been designed for specific electromagnetic purposes. Water management systems at these sites are equally sophisticated. Ancient civilizations worldwide developed incredibly advanced hydraulic engineering that allowed them to control water flow with precision that rivals modern capabilities. But more than that, they seem to understand the electromagnetic properties of flowing water and how to harness those properties for practical applications. The mineral content of water at these sites is often unusual, showing concentrations of elements that enhance electrical conductivity. The channels and conduits are carved from specific types of stone that have natural electromagnetic properties. Everything about these water systems suggests they were designed not just for practical water management, but as components in larger energy systems. Crystal technology provides another fascinating piece of this puzzle. Ancient sites worldwide show evidence of sophisticated understanding of crystalline properties. Quartz crystals are incorporated into structures in ways that suggest they weren't just decorative elements. They were functional components of larger technological systems. Modern analysis has revealed that many of these crystals are positioned and oriented to specific angles that maximize their piezoelectric properties. When pressure is applied to these crystals, they generate electrical charges. When electrical current is applied, they vibrate at precise frequencies. The ancient builders seem to understand these properties and incorporated them into their architectural designs. The implications are staggering. If these interconnected superstates had mastered acoustic resonance, electromagnetic field manipulation, and crystal technology, they would have possessed capabilities that we're only beginning to rediscover today. They might have had access to energy sources that were clean, renewable, and incredibly powerful. But here's where the story takes an even more incredible turn, because the evidence suggests that these technologies weren't just theoretical knowledge. They were practical applications that were used on a massive scale across the entire network of interconnected civilizations. Transportation systems between these superstates would have required incredible sophistication. We're not just talking about boats crossing oceans. We're talking about regular, reliable transportation networks that could move people, goods, and information across vast distances on a schedule that kept the entire network functioning as a coordinated unit. The navigational knowledge required for such operations is demonstrated in artifacts found worldwide. Ancient maps show geographical knowledge that shouldn't have been possible without aerial reconnaissance. Coastline details, mountain ranges, and island positions are depicted with accuracy that requires sophisticated surveying techniques. But more than just knowing where things were, these civilizations demonstrated understanding of ocean currents, wind patterns, and seasonal weather cycles that allowed them to optimize travel times across vast distances. They had mastered the art of reading natural signs that modern sailors require instruments to detect. The standardization of measurements across these networks provides compelling evidence of coordinated systems. Weights, measures, and mathematical constants appear consistently across continents in ways that suggest unified standards maintained across the entire interconnected system. This isn't accidental convergence. This is evidence of coordinated administrative systems operating on a global scale. Currency and trade systems show similar coordination. Precious metals and rare materials appear in archaeological contexts, far from their sources of origin, suggesting trade networks that operated with reliability and security across vast distances. The quality and consistency of work materials suggest standardized production techniques shared across the network. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the astronomical alignment systems found at sites worldwide. These aren't just random orientations towards celestial objects. These are sophisticated astronomical computers built into architectural structures. designed to track complex celestial cycles with mathematical precision. The knowledge required to create such systems is staggering. These ancient peoples understood precession cycles that take thousands of years to complete. They tracked planetary movements with accuracy that rivals modern calculations. They encoded this astronomical knowledge into permanent stone structures that served as both calendars and calculation devices. But here's what makes this truly incredible. These astronomical systems at sites around the world are all synchronized. They're all tracking the same celestial events, using the same baseline measurements, and operating as components in what appears to be a global astronomical observation network. The mathematical knowledge demonstrated in these systems is equally impressive. Complex geometric relationships, advanced trigonometric calculations, and sophisticated understanding of physics principles are encoded into structures worldwide. This isn't primitive astronomy. This is advanced mathematical science applied on an architectural scale. The precision of these calculations suggests not just theoretical knowledge, but practical application over extended periods. These weren't one-time construction projects. These were ongoing scientific installations that were maintained, calibrated, and operated by people who understood their functions and purposes. The coordination required to maintain such a network implies communication systems that could relay information across vast distances with speed and accuracy. Whether this was achieved through technological means we don't understand, or through systematic messenger networks, the evidence suggests these superstates maintained real-time coordination of their activities. The scope of what we're looking at is almost too incredible to fully grasp. We're talking about a prehistoric global civilization that possessed technological capabilities, organizational structures, and scientific knowledge that in many ways exceeded what we consider possible for ancient peoples. An interconnected network of superstates that operated as a unified system across distances that challenge our modern understanding of ancient capabilities. But if such an advanced, interconnected civilization existed, if Lemuria and Mu were indeed components of a global network that unified the ancient world under sophisticated technological and administrative systems, then we have to ask the most important question of all. What could possibly have been powerful enough to completely destroy such an advanced civilization? The answer to that question is going to change everything you think you know about human history, natural disasters, and the true vulnerability of even the most advanced civilizations. Because what destroyed these interconnected superstates wasn't just any ordinary catastrophe. It was an event so massive, so coordinated, and so complete that it didn't just end civilizations, it reset the entire trajectory of human development on Earth. The evidence points to something that makes every disaster movie look like a gentle spring shower. We're talking about a synchronized global catastrophe that struck with such precision and devastating power that it managed to simultaneously destroy multiple advanced civilizations spread across different continents and ocean basins. Now, here's where this gets absolutely terrifying. The geological record shows that around 12,000 years ago, Earth experienced what scientists call the Younger Dryas event, a sudden climate shift that plunged the planet into a mini ice age almost overnight. But recent research suggests this wasn't just a gradual climate change. This was triggered by something far more catastrophic. Impact evidence scattered across the planet tells a story that's going to make your blood run cold. Scientists have found microscopic diamonds, shocked quartz, and other materials that only form under the extreme pressures of cosmic impacts. These materials appear in geological layers worldwide, all dating to the exact same time period. We're not talking about one asteroid hit. We're talking about multiple impacts occurring simultaneously across the globe. But here's what makes this truly mind-blowing. The distribution pattern of these impact materials corresponds almost perfectly with the proposed locations of Mu and Lemuria's major population centers. It's as if whatever destroyed these superstates specifically targeted the most advanced and populated regions of their network. The scale of destruction would have been unimaginable. Massive tsunamis racing across ocean basins at speeds of over 500 miles per hour, carrying debris and destruction thousands of miles inland. Volcanic eruptions triggered by the seismic shock waves, filling the atmosphere with ash and blocking out sunlight for months or even years. Earthquakes so powerful they literally cracked continental shelves and sent entire land masses sliding into the ocean depths. But the most terrifying aspect of this catastrophe is how it affected the survivors. The few people who managed to escape the initial destruction found themselves in a world that had been completely transformed. The coastal civilizations where most of the population lived were gone, wiped out by tsunamis and seismic activity. The technological infrastructure that connected the global network was destroyed. The knowledge centers, libraries, and educational institutions that preserved their advanced understanding were buried under miles of debris or lost beneath rising sea levels. Imagine being a survivor of such devastation. Everything you knew about the world, every system you depended on, every connection to the broader civilization, suddenly gone. The advanced technologies that your society had mastered were useless without the infrastructure to support them. The global communication networks that kept the superstates coordinated were severed. The trade routes that supplied exotic materials were disrupted by geological upheaval. Within a single generation, survivors went from being citizens to survive in a globally connected technological civilization to isolated bands of refugees struggling altered world. The sophisticated knowledge that had taken millennia to develop was lost not because people forgot it, but because the systems needed to apply that knowledge no longer existed. This explains one of the most puzzling aspects of ancient history. Why do we find evidence of advanced capabilities in the archaeological record, but no continuous development of those capabilities? Why do ancient civilizations seem to possess knowledge they shouldn't have had, only to apparently lose that knowledge over time? The answer is that they weren't developing this knowledge independently. They were inheritors of fragments from the destroyed superstate network. The megalithic construction techniques, the astronomical knowledge, the metallurgical skills, the mathematical understanding, these weren't innovations of post-catastrophe civilizations. These were remnants of pre-catastrophe technology, passed down by survivors who understood the techniques but no longer had access to the full technological infrastructure that had originally developed them. This perspective completely transforms how we understand the rise of ancient civilizations like Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. These weren't the dawn of human sophistication. These were the first successful attempts to rebuild civilization using fragments of knowledge preserved from before the catastrophe. So there you have it. The evidence for Lemuria and Mu as interconnected superstates isn't just compelling, it's revolutionary. From geological discoveries proving lost continents existed exactly where ancient theories predicted, to archaeological patterns showing impossible coordination across vast distances, to genetic markers revealing prehistoric population movements that challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient capabilities. What we're looking at isn't mythology, it's the scattered fragments of humanity's greatest civilization, destroyed by a catastrophe so complete that we've spent 12,000 years trying to piece together what we lost. The next time you see those mysterious megalithic structures, remember, you might be looking at the last remnants of a global network that once unified our world in ways we're only beginning to understand.